I realized I had waited too long when my brother stood in the middle of his kitchen, voice shaking, defending his wife with words I knew were lies, because I'd heard her practice them on me the night before. She sat there, calm, hand wrapped around her coffee mug, looking at me like I was already guilty of something. When he asked if anyone else knew what was going on, her eyes flicked to mine for half a second. A warning. A reminder. I felt it then, that heavy, irreversible drop in my chest. The moment you understand, silence has already done its damage. He kept talking, kept insisting she would never cheat. That people were just trying to poison something good. I watched him repeat her excuses almost word for word, and I understood with terrifying clarity that my quiet hadn't protected him. It had protected her. My mouth opened. Closed. My mother cleared her throat and said, "This isn't the time." His wife smiled at me, soft, grateful, victorious. That smile told me everything. She was certain I'd stay quiet. That I always did. And standing there, listening to my brother unravel while I held the truth like a loaded weapon, I realized something worse than the affair itself. I wasn't just a witness anymore. I was part of the lie. From the outside, their marriage looked untouchable. The kind people pointed to when they wanted proof that love could actually work. Holiday cards with coordinated outfits. Weekend barbecues where she laughed easily and touched his arm like she adored him. Social media captions about my person and forever. If there were cracks, they were hidden behind carefully chosen angles and warm filters. My brother believed in that image completely. He wore his marriage like armor. Any hint of doubt from outsiders was met with immediate defensiveness. "You don't know her like I do." And honestly, for a long time I didn't question it either. She was kind to me. Attentive. Always remembering birthdays, always asking about my life. She made effort feel effortless. That was her real talent, control without force. She curated everything. How their relationship was seen. How conflicts were framed. How loyalty was defined. Being on her side didn't require words. Just silence. When people joked about how lucky my brother was, she smiled modestly and squeezed his hand. When he talked about their future, she nodded at all the right moments. No one saw manipulation. They saw devotion. And the scariest part? I did too, because believing in the perfect marriage was easier than questioning why it felt so carefully managed. The signs were there long before everything broke open. They just didn't look like red flags at the time, more like small inconveniences everyone chose to ignore. She guarded her phone like it was an extension of her body. Always face down. Always locked. If a notification buzzed, she'd glance first, then decide whether to share it or not. I noticed. I told myself it was nothing. She had friends from work my brother never met. Late meetings that turned into late nights. Stories that shifted slightly depending on who was listening. When I asked harmless questions, she answered smoothly, without hesitation, too smoothly. Confidence can sound a lot like honesty if you want it to. The biggest warning wasn't secrecy, though. It was how quickly she controlled the narrative. Any disagreement became someone else's misunderstanding. Any concern was labeled insecurity. If my brother felt uneasy, she reframed it as stress. If I looked confused, she laughed and said I was overthinking. Once, she told me quietly, almost affectionately, "You know how sensitive he is. I'm just trying to protect him." That sentence stuck with me longer than it should have. It sounded caring. It felt wrong. I saw the pattern forming and still chose comfort over clarity, because naming the truth would have meant disturbing the peace, and at the time, peace felt safer than honesty. There were nights I lay awake replaying conversations in my head, wondering if I was imagining things or if I was just too afraid to trust my instincts. I'd start drafting texts I never sent. "You should know something. We need to talk." Every version sounded dramatic. Every version felt like betrayal, not of her, but of him. Once, after too many glasses of wine, I almost told him. He was talking about how lucky he was, how steady his life finally felt. I watched his face soften when he said her name, and the words died in my throat. What kind of person shatters that certainty without absolute proof? I convinced myself I was being responsible. That silence was restraint, not cowardice. I tested the edges instead. Asked her careful questions. Watched her reactions. She never panicked. Never slipped. She met my doubt with patience and a gentle smile, like I was a child asking uncomfortable questions. Later, she pulled me aside and said, "I know you worry about him. That's why I trust you." It felt like a compliment. It was a warning. My doubt became a quiet companion. Always present. Never loud enough to force action. And with every day I waited, the cost of speaking grew heavier, until the truth felt less like a responsibility and more like a threat. The pressure didn't come all at once. It arrived in soft voices and reasonable phrases, wrapped in concern and good intentions. My mother was the first to say it out loud. "You don't know anything for sure," she told me, eyes sharp despite her calm tone. "And even if you did, this isn't your place." The message was clear: peace mattered more than certainty. Other family members echoed it in different ways. "You'll destroy him. Marriages go through phases. Why stir things up if you're not involved?" Each comment pushed me further into a corner where silence felt like the only acceptable option. No one asked how it felt to carry the weight alone. They just wanted it set down quietly. She was more direct. One afternoon, she closed the door behind us and spoke low, steady. "You're the only one who could really hurt him," she said. "I know you wouldn't do that." It wasn't a threat. It didn't need to be. She framed my silence as kindness. As loyalty. As proof that I was on the right side. And slowly, terrifyingly, I began to believe them. That saying nothing made me mature. Protective. Selfless. I didn't see yet that what they were asking for wasn't neutrality, it was participation. I told myself I was waiting for clarity. For proof. For the right moment. In reality, I was waiting for the responsibility to disappear. Every day I stayed quiet, I rehearsed the same justification: if I'm wrong, I ruin everything. If I'm right, I ruin everything anyway. Silence felt like the only option that didn't require blood on my hands. So I chose it, actively, deliberately. I smiled at family dinners. I nodded along when they talked about vacations and future plans. I laughed at her jokes and let her squeeze my hand under the table, that quiet reminder that we were aligned. Each time, a small part of me recoiled, but I pushed it down. This was the price of keeping the peace. The longer I stayed silent, the easier it became to rationalize. One more week. One more month. Things might settle. She might stop. He might notice on his own. I let hope do the work honesty should have done. But silence isn't empty. It fills itself with consequences. And without realizing it, I wasn't just avoiding a decision anymore, I had already made one. It didn't come out in a confession or a dramatic confrontation. It came out messily, uncontrollably, the way truths always do when they've been buried too long. A coworker's spouse found messages. Screenshots started circulating. Someone sent one to my brother, by accident, followed by a rushed apology that fooled no one. I wasn't there when he saw them, but I heard his voice afterward, hollow, disbelieving, already breaking. He kept asking how long. How many times. Whether any of it was real. She denied it at first, of course. Said the messages were taken out of context, that it was emotional, not physical. That people were exaggerating. The story shifted by the hour. What stunned me wasn't the revelation. It was how quickly everyone looked to me once the whispers became facts. As if they were searching my face for permission to be shocked. For confirmation that this hadn't come from nowhere. She didn't look at me then. Not once. Control was slipping, and she knew it. The truth had escaped her grip, and it was finally louder than all the silence I'd been hiding behind. The family didn't explode the way I expected. There were no screams, no dramatic walkouts. Just a stunned quiet that settled over everything like dust after a collapse. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Phones were checked obsessively. People spoke in careful fragments, as if full sentences might make it real. My mother kept saying, "This doesn't make sense," over and over, like the right repetition could undo it. An aunt whispered that there had to be an explanation. Someone suggested stress. Another suggested a misunderstanding. Even with proof in front of them, denial felt safer than acceptance. What shocked me most was how quickly the focus shifted from what she did to how this would look. Who knew? Who might find out? What the neighbors would think. The family instinct wasn't outrage, it was damage control. And in the middle of it all, my brother sat silent, staring at nothing, while everyone spoke around him instead of to him. I watched them circle the truth carefully, afraid to touch it, and felt something inside me crack. This wasn't just shock. It was the sound of a family realizing the story they believed in was never real, and not knowing what to replace it with. He didn't break all at once. It happened in pieces. First, the disbelief hardened into something sharp and quiet. He stopped asking questions and started replaying memories instead, like he could rewind his life and catch the exact moment it went wrong. He told me he felt stupid, not angry yet, just humiliated. Like everyone else must have seen something he missed. Then came the anger, sudden and terrifying. Not at her at first, but at himself. He listed every time he'd defended her. Every argument he'd shut down, every person he'd pushed away because they didn't respect his marriage. Watching him realize how fiercely he'd protected a lie was harder than watching him learn about the affair. The worst moment came late one night when he finally asked me, quietly, "Did you know?" I didn't answer right away. I didn't have to. My silence did it for me. Something collapsed in his face then, not just trust in his wife, but trust in the world he thought he understood. "So I was the last one," he said. Not accusing. Just stating a fact. That was when I understood the deepest damage wasn't the betrayal itself. It was the realization that while he was fighting for his marriage, the people closest to him were fighting to keep him in the dark. I couldn't stop seeing it, the pattern, the choices I had made. Every lie I let slide, every shrug, every smile that hid my doubt, every time I chose peace over truth, it had all built the bridge she walked across to destroy him. I wasn't just a bystander. I was a participant. Sitting alone in my room, I replayed every family gathering, every conversation, every interaction with her. The way I'd nodded when she subtly twisted the story, the way I'd laughed at jokes that felt off, the times I stayed quiet when my brother needed someone to speak for him, it all screamed, "You protected her, not him." Guilt wasn't just a feeling. It was a weight pressing on my chest, suffocating and relentless. I had thought silence was neutral. It wasn't. Silence had a side, hers. And now, watching the aftermath, I understood that the lie I helped maintain had shattered the person I loved most. For the first time, I didn't just regret staying quiet. I hated what that quiet had made me. It didn't happen in one dramatic moment. It was in the small things that finally gave her away. The charm that had always felt effortless now seemed rehearsed. The soft smile, the perfectly timed nods, they faltered when the world no longer followed her carefully constructed script. I watched her at a family dinner a week after the revelation. She tried to laugh, tried to maintain that aura of perfection, but the cracks were obvious. Her eyes darted constantly, calculating. The warmth she once used to disarm me felt cold now, sharp, almost mocking. For the first time, she looked tired, not just human, but exposed. And when my brother confronted her about something trivial, something small, she snapped. Not angrily, not loudly, but in that precise, cutting way that made everyone feel the tension, the hidden history, the manipulation. Her carefully maintained image couldn't withstand the truth. I realized then that the person everyone had adored, the woman who seemed untouchable, had no defense left. The mask was gone, and underneath, she was just a person desperate to reclaim control, too late. Once the dust settled, everyone suddenly remembered they had always known something was off. My mother, who had begged me to stay quiet, now said, "I always felt it, I just didn't want to admit it." My aunts and uncles nodded along, offering stories that conveniently painted me as paranoid, as dramatic, as the one who had overreacted. Even my brother's friends quietly whispered that they'd suspected something, as if the months of lies and denials were nothing more than a mutual understanding they'd kept secret. Everyone wanted a clean story, a narrative where the truth had always been obvious, except to me, the one who had actually carried the burden. I felt invisible in their retelling. My warnings, my doubts, my sleepless nights, erased. Every version of the past they told themselves conveniently minimized her betrayal and made my silence seem like overthinking. It was a cruel twist. While she had lost her control, the family's rewriting of history turned the moral weight back on me. I was complicit, yes, but now I was also the villain in the story they wanted to believe. With her mask gone and the truth undeniable, the balance shifted, slowly, quietly, but unmistakably. She no longer had the effortless control she once wielded. Her words, once persuasive weapons, stumbled. The smiles that used to disarm the room now carried tension, suspicion, even fear. People were listening to her differently. Carefully. Cautiously. For the first time, I felt a strange, reluctant empowerment. My voice, the one I had silenced for months, finally mattered. When I spoke, others heard me. When I revealed details I had kept hidden, the room shifted in response. I wasn't just a witness anymore, I had become a force of clarity. Even my brother, still fragile and wounded, turned to me for pieces of the story. The trust one had once risked by staying silent now became the bridge between him and reality. For all the guilt I carried, this was the first moment it felt like it could be redeemed. The scales had tipped. Control was no longer hers. And with every careful word I spoke, the consequences of her manipulation grew visible for everyone, not just in her faltering defenses, but in the way the family now saw the world without her lies. The fallout didn't happen overnight. It rolled through the family slowly, like waves eroding a shoreline. My brother stopped trusting so easily, not just in her, but in everyone around him. Every interaction, every word, carried the weight of what had been hidden. He learned that the people who were supposed to protect him had also been part of the deception. Her reputation collapsed in quiet but irreversible ways. Friends stopped inviting her, family members stopped seeking her approval, and the carefully curated image she had spent years building crumbled under scrutiny. She still tried to argue, to charm, to gaslight, but it no longer worked. The people who mattered, the ones who had seen the truth, no longer followed her script. And me? I carried the guilt and the scars. Relationships strained, whispers followed me, questions hung in the air. Some blamed me for staying quiet. Some thanked me for finally speaking. The truth had freed some, hurt others, and left no one untouched. We all learned the same brutal lesson: hiding reality doesn't protect anyone. It just delays the reckoning, and when it comes, it hits harder than silence ever could. Sitting alone now, months later, I still feel the weight of my choices. I can't change the silence I carried, but I can recognize what it taught me. Truth is heavy. It's uncomfortable. It's painful. But silence, pretending nothing is wrong, protecting the family, only protects the wrong people. I watched a carefully constructed life collapse, not because of a single act of betrayal, but because everyone around it chose comfort over honesty. I stayed quiet, and in doing so, I became complicit. My brother suffered more because I let fear decide for me. The lesson is brutal but simple: staying silent is a choice. And every choice has consequences. If you see something wrong, if you feel the weight of truth, don't let fear of drama or discomfort stop you. Speak, act, intervene, even if it feels impossible. Silence doesn't protect innocence. It shields the wrong side, and sometimes, that cost is everything you love. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: the family you try to protect with your quiet might not be the one that needs saving. Speak. Always speak.